Uh, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Power Books Live. And we're very excited because we have award-winning novelist and playwright Kia Corthron on with us today. We're talking about her latest novel, the second in, the second novel, and it is fabulous. Uh, Moon and Mars, Moon and the Mars, right? I'm tripping all over it. But I'm so excited. It's the second novel that I'm reading. I read the first one as well. I don't know if you remember, but we met very briefly at Lesley University. You read at Lesley University, and I was just so enthralled that I stupidly bought the over 500-page book to travel with on the plane.
Actually 800 pages, the first one.
Yes, 800 pages. It turned out okay because I just ended up reading it on the plane. But I was like, what am I going to do with it now that I bought it? I should have had it. I should have had it. Anyway, but I just ended up reading it on the plane, and well, not the whole thing, but I mean, it certainly kept me busy and was really exciting. And this new book is equally as exciting, set in a whole different world. Uh, and maybe we should share a little bit with the audience what it's about. And should tell them a little bit about, give them a snippet.
Yeah. Well, it takes place in the years 1857 to 1863. It's in New York City in the Five Points district, which was the slum. It was the poorest area.
Mhm.
And there were both a lot of Irish and Black people in this neighborhood. And there was a lot of exchange between them. Uh, Including sexually, their marriages, and I was really interested in addressing Black and Irish relationships at that time in New York, going into the Civil War. And so the way I felt to do it was to have the main character who's half Black and half Irish. So I actually decided my first book, there were four protagonists, all of whom were men. So I decided this book I'm going to focus on women. And so the main character is a little girl, and most of the characters that I focus on are women in this book. And yeah, she's half Black, half Irish. She's 7 at the beginning, 13 at the end, and there's a epilogue later. Yeah, that's
It's awesome. Theo, when you wait, I can't wait until readers meet Theo. She is one of the greatest narrators I have ever met. And I really want to meet Theo.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Oh my God. It's kind of interesting traveling back with historical fiction because I've been in New York City, modern day New York City. And so reading bits and pieces about what New York City used to be, right? Or, what was New York City, back in the 1800s. I mean, it's just amazing. And one of the things that struck me about Theo is how adult she seems to be
Hmm.
as a 7-year-old. I mean, she's like free floating around between, grandparents' houses and aunts' houses, and I'm thinking right now we would be terrified to let an 8-year-old do the things that Theo is doing. What do you think about that evolution in society? I mean, it seems really kind of
Yeah, well, actually, also at that time, especially in this neighborhood where people were desperately poor,
yeah.
often depended on the kids to work. I mean, whether that was, I mean, sometimes it was just her gathering coal for the stove, but but yeah, in order to get by, that was something that was a survival technique. And I think in this neighborhood, um, it, as I said, it was a poverty-stricken neighborhood. It was a slum, but it was her neighborhood. She knew it well. She knew the streets. She would go way uptown to,
Everybody's neighborhood.
her aunt lived in Seneca Village, which is a neighborhood that is no longer existent because Central Park was built over Seneca Village, or at least Central Park is huge, but part of it was at Seneca Village, which was an interesting community because um, there were Black people as well as Irish people, as well as there were actually at that time in New York and the country, there were a lot of German immigrants. And probably second to the Irish, I'd say. And but in Seneca Village, the gentry, the owners were Black people because they had been there for generations. And so yeah, that was one of the things that particularly tragic when this community was lost, replaced by Central Park.
Yeah. It's sort of, we hear these stories now. Oh, the neighborhood's being gentrified and and people are being displaced, and just to go back and see how it was then, and that was still that was happening even then.
Exactly. We call it Central Park because it is central, but originally the idea was that there was going to be a big city park. It didn't necessarily have to be central. And the idea was originally it could have been further east, but that was getting into the wealthy people's land. And so instead it became the Fifth Avenue mansions. It basically became their front yard, and their property values went up even more. So there was definitely thinking not just about race, but also rich and poor and protecting the wealthy.
Racism and economics, I tell you, doesn't go away at all. I love Theo's two families, the Irish and the African American, and how they interact or engage, as you said. There is this, and she's learning from both worlds. There's a point in the book where somebody says she's half something, and then somebody says there's no such thing as half. And that's something that I think that the biracial people and people of color in our world still struggle with. What is this half? You're half this, you're half that. You're all Irish, you're all Black. You're Irish and Black, or Black Irish, but it was just, I thought that was interesting. How did it feel sort of delving into that?
Well, I grew up African American, and so both my parents are Black. So, that's a culture I recognize, though it was still a challenge going more than a century before. And also one of the important characters, Auntie Miriam, was an escaped slave, and I wanted not to be stereotypical about her language. And then a whole different world was the Irish, and that there was some text in the Irish language, but it was more a matter of the English and Irish syntax. So, yeah, and there was also the challenge, a big challenge because she is a child, that there were times, and she goes from 7 to 13 to adolescence. So she gains knowledge as she grows. But especially early on, there were times when, because I read it in first person, I challenged myself that there were some times when the reader may know a little more of what's going on than she does. She doesn't see, whether it's racism or what's going on. She may not see it. It may be over her head, but the reader should be aware of it.
Reader knows, yeah. Let's talk about language. I love your language in both books, and seems to me that this one might have even been more complicated because of all the different cultural mixes and swirls that you're doing. But I teach rhetoric and composition in college, and
Uh-huh.
there's this movie that I show every semester called The Grammar Revolution. And so
Mhm.
we have these linguists and these grammarians talking about whether or not grammar rules are hard and fast, and
Um,
how you use grammar to get your point across. And so as I'm reading your book, I'm just like, I want to assign it to my class. I can't. I want to, because you are doing this tightrope, right? You're doing this tightrope between the language of the 19th century, for 21st century readers, and the language of the Irish, and then the language, the dialect of the Irish after they are here. So there's all this going on. What was that like for you? I mean, I know I read something where you went to Ireland, and so you got a sense of which dialect you wanted to focus on. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I did go to Ireland a couple of years ago, and I traveled around a bit. One part of it was in a residency in County Kerry, which is southwest. If you look at a map of Ireland, it's kind of like the fingers jutting out of the sea. It was gorgeous. And when they talk about the beauty of Ireland in the book, I'm completely imagining that when I was there, and there were, it's sort of like the mountains were right there, and there's sheep all in all among them, and then it juts right down this cliff to the sea, and the water was like Caribbean green. It was just so gorgeous. um and the man, it was very much, it was a residency. We were sort of on our own, which was in many ways was great, because these cottages, these stone cottages, were pre-famine. So the famine was 1845 to 49. I think that's generally
Yeah,
the parameters. So it was before the famine. That's how old they are,
yeah,
and somewhat remodeled inside. But it was great to be in that. Yeah, it was great to be in a place like that. But there was a caretaker who would come around every once in a while just to make sure we were okay.
mhm.
Nice man. I had so much trouble understanding what he was saying, because Carrie in particular is a heavy accent, and he was speaking English. I mean, I should say Carrie is Gael talked, which means the first language is Irish. So that's where they're most fluent. But he could speak English, but I just had so much trouble understanding. But I
Yeah.
was there in March and was able to walk. It was a good 4 miles to the nearest town. And by town, I mean, I think there were like 350 people population or something.
Okay.
And,
Uh-huh. A
and,
little town, yes. A hamlet, yes.
and it was so sweet. It was St. Patrick's Day. They had the St. Patrick's Day parade. So it lasted like 10 minutes. There was an MC through the whole thing. I could understand every word. So, there's so many factors how that
Yeah,
depends. But
yeah,
it did make a lot of sense, in terms of people refugees from the famine. There was a lot of sense. Um, there are about 4 counties, and Kerry was one of them. That was the one I selected, and also because I was there, that I thought this would be the place where my Irish family would be from. So,
yeah. Right, what you got a chance to see it and
yeah.
and get it. That's wonderful. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just looking at that, and also the way conversations are formatted in the book,
Mhm.
not using quotation marks
Mhm.
and those kinds of things that we're used to seeing. I think that all plays a part in the delivery of your story. I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's all deliberate.
Yes, yeah. Well, from my first novel, The Castle Across the Magna Carta, I would change from section to section. This one would be first person, this would be third.
Mhm.
Sometimes it would be complete grammar with all the quote marks, sometimes it wouldn't. And it really depended how what felt appropriate for that section.
Mhm.
So in Castle Cross, when I get to the part where the character Elliot is a young adult and he's a lawyer, suddenly it felt going to third person and using all the proper grammar felt like
Mhm.
the right thing to do here because it felt lawyerly, somehow. So yeah, it just sort of depends. And then with BJ, the deaf character,
Mhm.
because they were speaking in sign language, that
Right.
for the most part there were no quote marks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um in this one, though, I just made a decision to go all the way through without quote marks. Although her language changes, both because she's getting older and Theo, and because of education. At some point, she starts going to school, and she's very smart from the very beginning. She has a school teacher aunt,
Right.
her aunt who teaches at the colored school number 3, which was also lost because
Very
of her
special.
park. So she's very much self-taught or taught by her teacher or auntie, even though she goes to school.
Yeah.
Um, but when she goes to school, things get a little more, her language does start to change a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And her Irish family loves to read the news, so she's always
Yes.
she gets the news from everywhere, and
Well, yes, at that time, and her, I guess that is true. It's more because both the families do, but I guess it seems to come up more in the Irish family, maybe um, because there's other family, like with the for example, like with the big slave auction, the huge slave auction. They're definitely reading the papers that happens in the South. They're reading the papers with that. And when Lincoln is elected, they're reading the papers. So I guess it's both families, but maybe it was a little more heavier with the Irish family.
time with the Irish family. I mean, it's just it seems like something they do, like we sit down and we watch the news. Well, I don't, but
Yeah.
and it seemed like that was just a regular thing with them.
Yeah. And there were over 100. I may be even really underestimating. We're definitely at least 100 newspapers. I don't even know if it was maybe 200, but definitely over 100 papers
Yeah,
in New York City. So,
amazing.
and most of them were
We
penny
barely
press.
support one or two.
I know, and
Right?
they closed and closed. I mean, that's a whole depressing other story.
Yeah,
But yeah, so they could look through different papers to get well, there were different points of view, different perspectives. Some were abolitionist, some were not abolitionist,
yeah.
some
Mhm.
were anti-abolitionist, a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But also just different news depending on the papers. So
Uh, I don't know if you are a review reader. I tend not to be because I prefer my own opinion. Um, I might read a review afterwards, but I prefer my own opinion going in. And so I read a Kirkus review where they seem to think that you tried to do too much. That
yeah, yeah.
What do you think about that? Because I really was excited about all the history and all the everything. So what
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah. First of all, I'll tell you, I'm also a playwright, and I don't read theater reviews.
Yeah.
I made a decision whether I would read reviews um, once I started writing novels, and uh, for different reasons, I wound up reading them. So I so I did read that, and it was a I will say it was a little worrisome because I was afraid it was a trend, but things have been really good since actually the one before it and since then have been very positive. But yeah, it seemed to imply that that this was a textbook. An interesting, I shouldn't go on and on about reviews of my own book, but an interesting thing in
Yeah.
the
No.
In the review in the Wall Street Journal was that he brought up an interesting question of when, which was I should say was positive, but he did bring up an interesting question of what happens when you're telling a story about history and you want to be true to that time, but you're telling it to modern readers who don't know what happened, you know? And so part of it, you're either going to cheat, so that uh, you're either going to cheat so modern readers dumb it down for modern readers,
Mhm.
or but I also don't want to lose modern readers, and I want to be true to that time.
Mhm.
And so the only way is to balance it with
Mhm.
providing the information in a way that, because people read newspapers all the time and people were literate. I mean, we were quite a
Yeah.
literate country early on. Um, and certainly in New York, there were certain organizations that it was about literacy. So, I mean, not as literate as now, but certainly like 80%. I mean, it was a high literacy rate. So
Yeah.
that,
I would almost venture to say that you were right the first time. I would almost say that they were more literate. People were more literate
mhm,
because
mhm,
now we're not relying on the same tools. We
mhm,
have advanced technology, but one of the things I love about this Grammar Revolution movie that I show every year is that
mhm,
it talks about the focus being different in years past, where people who were not even high school educated were way more literate than some of our high school students now. And that
mhm,
we look at their writings and their things and we think, oh, they were exceptionally smart. And no, they were just exceptionally well taught, right? They were just, uh,
yeah.
there were some specific things that were focused on. So as I'm reading it, I guess because I don't know, maybe just because because I'm a writer, I think I'm reading it as a writer. And so I'm looking at how you are skillfully, masterfully uh, showing us and telling us in various ways the story, right? You're using the newspaper clippings that we can actually see, or we can hear the newsboys uh, actually yelling the headlines like they used to. And all of that,
Mhm,
all of those things fall into the conversations with the families, the conversations with Theo and various other characters that she's engaging with.
mhm,
You're
mhm, mhm.
seeing all of this information. And I personally think it's masterful. So just to get my review in, yeah, because I'd like to see this person try it, because I think that's incredible. How long, I hear people talking about how long it takes to write their book. How long did it take? Because it's been at least 3 years since I was at Leslie. So how long did it take?
Well, I started it, um well, my first novel was released early 2016, and somewhere later in that year, I began reading some research, thinking I might write this novel, but not sure. I was just sort of reading things. And then in January, I was at McDowell, the artist colony in New Hampshire, and I fiddled around with a few chapters, and one night I did a presentation, and people really really liked that chapter.
Mhm,
So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go through with this.
mhm,
But then things got busy with theater and some other stuff. So it wasn't, I sort of played with it, but I didn't really go back in force until the summer of 2018. And I was at another residency in Switzerland, actually. And I was there for a month, and I told myself, okay, you were either going to write this novel or you're not. But in this month, you're going to decide. Like, you can't just keep putting it off,
get on with it
deciding what you're
now.
going to do. So I wrote it that month. And I remember I had two questions for myself, which, do I have another novel in me? I'd written one, I've written lots of plays. And the second was, will it be as good as my first novel? And by the end of the month, I thought, yes, I do have a second novel in me. And I thought, whether it's good as the first or not, it doesn't matter. It's its own thing. So,
It's a
so then from then on, so I would say I did start it, as I said, research 2016, the top of 2017, but really writing in earnest mostly from like summer of 2018.
yeah, yeah. So did the pandemic help or hinder?
Well, I finished it um the spring a year, wait a minute, 28. No, sorry, 2020. So spring, like 2 years later. I um I I finished the draft that I began to show people, including 7 Stories, my same publisher, um, April 15th. Um, so it was kind of when things had just shut
That's
down.
yeah, yeah.
And then later, a few months later, it took time for uh, um, businessy things, and with 7 Stories and blah blah blah, and then my editor going through it. So then, in terms of, and also I was hearing back from friends that I had feedback, and so then I continued to write during that time. Truthfully, the pandemic itself didn't really affect the writing, because
Good.
a friend of mine who's a composer, I was recently in touch with him, and he was talking about how for him it was very depressing during the pandemic. He couldn't generate new work, and certainly also for my playwrights friends is very depressing because the performing arts in general, things shut
No one's
down.
going to the theater. Yeah.
Yeah, but because I was working on a novel, and by the time the pandemic came, I was so into it. I'd done several drafts on my own before I'd shown anyone.
Mhm.
It wasn't about generating new work. So it wasn't like I had to pull myself out of the depression to start
Yeah.
this. So, um,
Putting the finishing touches on.
yeah, it didn't really, yeah, I mean, I still had work to do, but I was so far into it that it didn't really affect it.
It, it,
Except in the sense that staying busy made me less depressed, maybe during the pandemic. Yeah.
right. Well, writing for novelists is so solitary anyway. So it's kind of like we need the quiet. Although I have to say, I didn't generate anything in 2020. Like my head was in this just weird sort of pandemic place.
Yeah,
Um,
many people.
uh, why don't we share with our listeners some of the book? Would you like to read something for us?
Yes, I
Please. I love
would.
it when you read. You're animated, and I love that. Some people write well but can't read their work well, and it drives me crazy. But you're
Um, do you want to? There's a piece that I read, but it's about 10 minutes. That's probably too long, right? Want something a little shorter?
well, let's see what we got here. No, we've got time for 10 minutes. I don't know if you feel like we need to break it up, but
No, it's okay. That is so ridiculous that I wasn't quite ready for. Like I
oh,
you wouldn't have asked
yeah,
me that.
I lulled you in the conversation.
No, no, no. I just have to look it up. You can keep talking while I find it on my computer.
No,
That I'll read.
yeah. I like I like just to have a conversation with a writer and just kind of flow and talk about things and
Yeah.
so I kind of
Yes.
sometimes it's like, wow, you want to read? And they're like, no.
No, actually, this is because I um am a oh shoot. Um because I'm a uh theater artist,
Mhm.
um it's easier for me to read. But somehow
I think so.
like
I
somehow
certainly agree with you.
so
You
or
know,
otherwise I would have been more prepared. But you can keep talking and I will find it
I'm
here.
sure.
Oh,
Sometimes
wait, I know what could be. Okay, you keep talking.
vocalists, singers also take a little acting sometimes so that they can get into character. And I think writers might well take some sort of a class before reading the work. Because
You know,
sometimes they're their own worst commercial. I'm like, stop, stop, give me the book, just stop. But I was so enthralled when I heard you, so I think our audience will be.
oh, okay. Okay, I've got it. I've got it.
Okay.
Okay. Usually, being a theater person, I also I rehearse before I did, but I didn't get to rehearse today. So I may stumble a bit, but I've read this a few times now, so I think I can do it. So it is 1858. And so we're in 5 points, as I explained. This is Theo. And in this scene, this is actually a little north of 5 points. So it's Miriam, who is uh, she is now her auntie. But she's not a blood relative. She was escaped
Right.
from an escaped slave, and she is pretty newly married in this chapter and lives with her husband in the West 30s. So it's a little north of 5 points. You like the 20th Ward, Auntie Miriam? Yes. Me and her out in the country garden she planted, yard of her and Mr. Samuel's house uptown, West 32nd. Off West 32nd, built in a courtyard behind a tenement away from the street. Summer crops are ripening, the cabbage and the peas, corn. I gives you cabbage and peas and corn for your Grammy. We got plenty. And Auntie Miriam spread out her arms to prove it. Her voice sound like a smile, even though I don't see it. The net hanging from her garden hat so thick can't make out her face. Her garden gloves cover her hands, though now and again she slip 'em off brief. Let the earth pour through her fingers. Weeding and picking up stray straw. Mr. Samuel gathered it. Chimney sweep the winter, but selling straw for mattresses summer-colored work. You're good at gardening, Auntie Miriam. As the ace ricer, South Carolina. And cotton picker? Auntie Miriam shake her head. Rice and cotton, two different skill. Take training. If Mr. Samuel would get tired of the straw selling, he can sell buttermilk, I offer. Then we get buttermilk free. Mr. Samuel, lucky he got the partnership with the farmer for the straw. The buttermilk colored men got to enter to a contract for the cow. Stop! I's much obliged for your help, Theo, but what you just pulled was not a weed. Why don't you just stays collecting the straw? Inside, Auntie Miriam put some cabbage and peas and corn in my gunny sack. Then pour his coffee, slice the bread. She made good bread, sweet. Auntie Miriam, Mr. Samuel's house, big. Front room plus bed closet, 3 rooms. The little bed closet Auntie Miriam called the room of hope. Auntie Miriam, like never was no depression, your house. When the hard times come and the banks run, Mr. Samuel had some specie hid away. The land values drop. He got a regular gentleman's chimney customer looking to unload property. Republican gentleman friendly to Negroes. Lots of Negroes your street, Auntie Miriam. And you and Mr. Samuel got a yard. She nods, sit back, stare out her little window in her little garden. 'Twas a devotion. Mr. Samuel grew up 5 points, never he think to remove. But I longs for the air, this he do for me. Space the only thing I miss 'bout Dixie. And my hands knowing the magic, knowing how to make soil deliver. Then I'm shucking Auntie Miriam's corn for her while she churned the butter. Now her eyes turn to me. I gots to go out little while. You help me? I nod. I love helping Auntie Miriam. She opened a big jar of the concoction. I can smell her recipe. Almond oil, shea butter, beeswax. I know how to spread it thin, cover her right arm, not a peep of her real skin show through. Fine work, she say, smiling. While I spread the liniment over her left arm and hand and back of her neck, she stare into her little round looking glass set on the table, applying it to her cheeks and chin and forehead and eyelids. Auntie Miriam looked funny, light skin her face and neck and hands, and dark everywhere else. But face and neck and hands, the only parts shows when she out and about, so them's the only places she need to potion. After Auntie Miriam and Mr. Samuel make their newlywed nest, she decide time to start leaving the house on occasion, and here's what I reckon. Auntie Miriam remember Miss Sally, colored boarder to Auntie Siobhan, who make herself light and pretty for the gentlemen, and Auntie Miriam want to be with the fashion. Auntie Miriam, Africa at home, mulatto in the street. I amble with her to Miss Philippa's down in Little Africa, Greenwich Village. Miss Philippa, I see right away, don't waste nice on nobody, but do acknowledge us with a civil greeting, gap between her front teeth. Auntie Miriam hand Miss Philippa some coin, and Miss Philippa passed to Auntie Miriam a little pouch. Miss Philippa give a few instructions, and that's pretty much all the words they use up. I stroll with Auntie Miriam back up to the 30s. She sigh. Guess you's big enough. There's days I worries, slave catcher right round the bend, but other days figure it never be. Why master bother? Years I'm ripe and being cultivated, yet not once he planted in me nothing fertilized to increase his crop of darkies. You understand? I nod, but I don't know what Auntie Miriam's talking about. In the distance, the thunder rumble. And I knows Mr. Samuel and me only married a short spell. Your anniversary last week, July the 7th, 4 months. 4 months. Still, she swallow. Miss Philippa know her herb. Gonna help me fill the room of hope. And Auntie Miriam's right fingers gentle caress Miss Philippa's pouch. Left hand caress her belly. Then the sky open, sheets hammering. We race to her house. Even in the rain, Auntie Miriam's light skin cream barely smudged. Want me help clean you up, Auntie Miriam? No, I gets to it. I look at her. Usually she liked to wash the high yellow off second she walked through the door. Then I remember Mr. Samuel gone before crack of dawn. Didn't get to catch a glimpse of his light wife today. Cloudburst big, not letting up. Getting toward dark and no Mr. Samuel. He got sense enough wait out the storm, she say. You too. May as well stay the night. Then she pull out a deck. Pick. First, I don't know what. I never done no cards before. Never been close to no heart, no diamond. Afraid I'm doing it wrong. Still, I go deep in the pile, glance it fast so she can't see. Leave it back atop as instructed. Auntie Miriam shuffle, pull it out. Deuce of clubs. How'd she do that? Broth and bread then. Time to hit the hay. But she ain't hitting no hay. Auntie Miriam take to her rocking chair, light her smoke, waiting for Mr. Samuel. I never seen Auntie Miriam smoke before, but now she enjoy her pipe like she was born to it. I stand at the doorway of the room of hope, which is where I'm supposed to hit the hay, but I'm not ready to. I help wash the dishes, Auntie Miriam. I gets to him directly. She puff, eyes on the dark out the window. I never seen Auntie Miriam lazy at Grammys. I like it. But wonder why she prolonging a chore. Then I know she don't want to stick her hands in no water yet. Now you really look like my Auntie Miriam. She turned to me, eyebrows a question. Or my mother, I giggle, except my mother was Irish. She couldn't look like her. Auntie Miriam's eyes stuck on me. I chuckle, but my laugh's starting to lose air. I want to stop, but her eyes don't let it. Both us pretty. Light. Her puffin' stop. Eyes narrow. You know why I do this, Theo. I stare. Auntie Miriam never stirred to me like that before. I nod. Then why you natter on? I don't know what answer I'm supposed to give to that. She sigh back to her rockin', eyes back to the window. Me and the crickets wait. I'm a homebody, likes my walls around me, but sometime gots to show my face in the world, the odd errand. I knows you likes cleaning the light skin off, but sometime I likes to wait for Mr. Samuel. Which is just what I reckoned, waiting for him to see her pretty and light, but figure best keep that reckoning to myself. Now Auntie Miriam looked to the looking glass, staring at her fair cheeks. No smile. She speaks soft, like more talking to the mirror than to me. No kidnapping me back whipping chain. South Carolina ain't never finding their dark-skinned Lizzie. Not on the street, nohow. Then we both quiet till my yawns sneak up and bellow. In my dream, I'm walking down Broadway with Auntie Miriam, and here come the slave catchers. Then I see Auntie Miriam forgot to put on her light-skinned disguise. Scared for her. You seen Lizzie? One of them say. I shake my head. No, no, no. But surely they see my heart pound through my chest. Then Auntie Miriam beside me takes a laugh and hold her belly rolling on the ground. The funniest joke. I start to smile, then feel my water. Wake up, slip outside to the Irish shanty, which is something I recently heard Great Uncle Fergus mutter, but when I said it, Kathleen and Cousin Eileen snapped, call it WC, outhouse, privy. Outside, no more rain, just the mud. Walk back when I'm done. On the stoops, a pail of water for clean and dirty feet. Rub them till they glisten, then step inside. A murmur from the other bed closet. Mr. Samuel must have come home while I was emptying myself. Creep back to the room of hope. Notice the other door ajar. Mr. Samuel washing the light skin off Auntie Miriam. In the chimney sweep in winter, Mr. Samuel always carried the soot filth, but now washed, him darker in me, but lighter in his wife, and on the bed they sit together, her face already clean brown. Now he work her arms. He do it soft, his skin moving slow against hers, face close to each other, eyes warm at each other, and where he washed off the light lotion and her brown flesh peeking through, he kisses, his lips against her clean, soft elbow, brown, soft lower arm, muscle and fat, slow and mellow, her shining, deep, dark brown skin, delicate and strong. And the gentle and the tender and the smiling get to feeling so much like something private, like something ought to only be between man and wife, that I get the blush and scurry quiet back to my own room. Good night.
I remember that. And that just it thank you so much. I hope everybody was just as entertained, but I think that that's one of those sections that you talk about where Theo doesn't really get it. She's not quite sure what's going on, while the rest of us,
Yes.
the rest of us, we do know. So what an exquisite reading, and thank you for sharing it with us. The book is really, really good. I'm not just blowing hot air at you. It's really, really good. And so you need to get it. It is on sale at Powher Books today and every day for 20% off. I'm actually beating out my huge competitor whose name I never mention.
Yes.
Go on there and buy your copy, and also buy your copy of the first novel, because I've got that one on there too.
Yes, The Castle Across the Magnet Carter.
Yes, and soon we'll have the your play books too in stock, but we don't have those yet. But it's just great. I love to always kind of get to know our authors and ask them sort of trivial questions like, what is your favorite book written by a woman? Since Power Books
You
only
know
says.
what? Let me think about that. My computer is telling me it's going to die. It'll take me 1 second to
Okay,
in. Yes.
we don't want it to die. Stay with us, computer.
Okay, I'm good now. My favorite book written by a woman. Wow. There could be so many. I mean, I can totally name like the obvious, like Beloved, is definitely up there. Um I Jane Eyre.
Yeah.
um I recently read a book by, I was going to say a British author, but she's actually Welsh. Do you know Sarah Waters?
Oh no, I don't.
I read this book called oh my gosh, now I'm going complete The Paying Guests.
The paying
Paying
guest.
Guests.
Yeah.
That really kind of blew me away.
Oh,
Um
got to find that.
yes, I read a book recently called Barn 8 by Deb Olin Unferth, I think is her name, which is a radical animal rights book that I loved.
Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
I love. I've recently come across I uh, um the Vanishing. This book, not The Vanishing Twins, the book, The Vanishing,
Yeah. Yeah.
book I'm talking about.
I haven't read it yet, but I actually have it on my to-do list in my to-do pile.
Yes. Yeah, really wonderful writing. Though I didn't read her first book until after the Mothers, and I liked it even better, The Mother.
Yeah.
Completely different stories, and the Vanishing Half
Vanishing Half.
is much. It's a much more complicated story. The
Mhm.
Mothers is simpler. Um, but there was something, both of them are worth reading, but the first one in particular was
Have to push it up.
it sort of caught me by surprise the way it moved me at the end.
Yeah. Music. Who's your favorite? What's your favorite music or artist or band?
Oh my gosh. What's my favorite? Oh my gosh. I like so much old music.
Mhm.
I I went to this summer to the Grand Canyon. Never seen the Grand Canyon before with a friend. And I'm coming back, was playing like Stevie Wonder, right? And because I should say we were at Las Vegas. It's like a few hours drive back, and so we were playing Stevie Wonder. So
Here's where I am. Yeah.
yeah.
Stevie Wonder, yay.
Yes.
Inner Visions or Hotter Than July.
Yes. Totally. It's interesting because he goes through different periods. I mean, he was brilliant from the beginning when you talk about fingertips, right?
Yeah.
But it is interesting how it's hard to say it got more sophisticated, because he was so sophisticated when he was a child. But there was something that added as it went more. And I don't love it anymore, but I just see the growth in a certain way as an artist. When you get to like
a lot of layers.
Yeah, like Superstition, later. I mean, because believe me, I can love me some Signed, Sealed, Delivered, but there's also like when you get to oh, what's the one that's very, because he did a couple of ones that were very reggae. So there was Boogie on Reggae Woman, but there was another one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, I know what you're talking
was it
about.
Master Blaster? Or there was
Master
anyway.
Blaster. Yeah, Master Blaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, it sounds like he grew more into his exploration of different instrumentation, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like fingertips. He's like, let me just show you what I've got right here. And then as he grew older and more musically savvy, he started saying, okay, this is the kind of gumbo that I can really make,
Yeah.
That's what it feels like musically he did,
Recently, a friend of mine got me, this is not the kind of book I usually read, and I loved it. It was like an autobiography of the Temptations by Otis,
Oh,
because we had seen, as a theater person, I get all these tickets, and we had seen the Temptations show on Broadway. So my friend that I went with gave me this book, right? But it's interesting because he talks about like the old days when they would be riding a bus from, city to city to do their shows in the early days of Motown. And it was interesting because he was saying the singers tend to be in the front of the bus, but the musicians who were like so cool were in the back of the bus. And Stevie was with the musicians, always hung with the musicians.
Yeah. That's where he was learning new tricks and sharing ideas and getting all the seasoning ready for that next thing. That's really cool. What about food? What's your favorite kind of food? Do you like to cook or do you like restaurants?
Oh my God, I'm a terrible cook, but I can tell you my favorite in restaurants is. But well, my birthday, traditionally, I would always go for Ethiopian because we could all share. So I kind of liked they could have friends and we could all share.
Yeah.
But I like all kinds. I mean, I like I'm a vegetarian, but I like American food in terms of like veggie burgers and things like that. But I also Indian food, good Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai.
Yeah.
I'm not too hard to please. Mexican. I tend though to like I'm more drawn to spicier food than because I can like me. I like pierogies and things. I do. I love pierogies and things, but I tend to go less sort of. I kind of think of it as the sort of when it's like Russian or Eastern European. When it's sometimes I call it like the white foods. I'm not talking about race, not race, but like
the food is white.
Potatoes and things like that. I like that stuff, but my favorite are probably more I lean towards more spicy food.
Oh my God, a good curry. I woke up thinking about Indian curry. Goat curry specifically. I love it.
So I'm not, for example, I'm not wild about French food, but like Senegalese. So if it's like African francophone food, like that, I can like, yes.
Oh my God, that's so, I've got to get to New York so we can sample your favorite Ethiopian. Yes. But thank you so much for coming on and being with us and doing it twice in a row. We loved it. The reading.
For the audience, we had our times mixed up. I thought it was East Coast time, and
you're like, I'm on here. Where are you? What's going on? But I was still sleeping. It's been great having you, and I look forward to having you again because I know there's some other greatness waiting to come out of you.
Thank you.
What should we be looking for? What's coming next?
Well, I do have an idea for a novel, but it's way too early to talk about that. But I'm sometime before this is not on your coast, but sometime before the end of 2022, a play of mine at Arena Stage in DC, it's actually a biographical play about Anna Julia Cooper, who was a legendary Black educator. She was born to North Carolinian slavery, but she was a child when emancipation came, and she just became this brilliant person. I mean, her big subject was math. She could do all the math, but
Oh,
she also she ended up becoming a teacher and a principal at the M Street School in DC, which is a famous school partly because it became partly a prep school for Black students. And what she taught there was Greek and Latin. So she could also do, besides the math, she could do all the classic languages,
yeah.
and became the principal. And it was at a time when there was a lot of controversy um, with a lot of people that held the money. So this is around the turn of the century, who were, 99.9% white people at that time who held the money, who felt that Black education should not be classical, should not be geared towards going to college, but should be in the trades. And so it was at a time when there was that going on. And so anyway, I wrote a play that's supposed to be there before the end of 2022. All depends on COVID, but it's supposed to.
I have my mask and will travel. So I look forward to hearing about that.
Oh, and I just always have to say this. She is, people have not heard of her, and I hadn't before I accidentally discovered her. She's the only woman quoted in your passport. So
Really?
Look her up.
That. Look what I have right on my.
Look her up. You can look at it right now. It's the page. I think it's the page with the Statue of Liberty, I believe.
Page with the Statue of Liberty.
It's near the end.
Near the end. Okay. Mine may be defective. No.
Unless I don't know.
I don't see it. But I'll find it.
Do you have a new passport? Maybe there's.
My
passport is a few years old, so maybe they've changed.
Mine is it's about 20 years old. At least 20 years old. It should be in here somewhere. Whatever. We won't have people wait for me to find it, but I'll find it because I'm just that kind of person. Like, where is it? But I look forward to hearing about when the play launches, and we have to keep in touch. Thank you so much, and you have a good rest of the day.
You too. Thank you.
You should eat something yummy.
Okay. Not for Vietnamese. So yes.
Yes. Ooh, yes. Okay. Sounds good. Have some fun. Yes. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.